Hello everyone, and welcome to my little corner of the internet. Today, I want to share with you my experience with Stephen King's It. Talking about books on YouTube has been something that I've thought of for a long while, but I hadn't really brought myself up to the task. But as I was reading It, I kept thinking, well, why not? It's just something I can do for my own enjoyment, and even if it's hard work, it ought to be fun. I hope. But my main motivation is mostly that I like the people to talk about the books I'm reading about. And I really, really want that. And because I feel the need to bring drawing into everything that I do, while I tell you my thoughts on the book, I'll also be drawing two characters as described in the story to the best of my abilities. So far, I've only read 4 of Stephen King's books. It isn't a lot considering how big his catalog is, but I've liked them all. I really liked them all so far. Dr. Sleep is my favorite though, but that's a topic for another time. There's something that always happens to me when I'm reading his books, and it's that I read them like I can't keep my hands off the pages. I think perhaps, for me at least, it's that his narration flows so flawlessly that I can't help but to go on to the next chapter and the next chapter and the next chapter. That, I think, has only encouraged me to want to read more of his books. Right now, I've got my sights on Fairy Tale, Pet Cemetery, and maybe Salem's Lot. Now, a brief summary for the uninitiated, though I want to assume that if you're here, it's because you've seen the movies or you've read the book, but if not, here's a small summary. It is the story of 7 friends, first in childhood and then in adulthood, who face an evil entity that haunts their town every 27 years, more or less. This entity, It, takes the shape of whatever the children he kills fear the most. And one of its favorite shapes, it's the very, very famous clown Pennywise. Tim Curry did it better. For the first character, I chose Beverly Marsh. When I began reading the book and discovered she had very, very long hair, that she very obviously doesn't have in the newer movies, I was immediately outraged. I would ramble for a long while about women and long hair and why I don't like this decision, but I don't think we want to be here all day. At least I don't. I want to keep this video as concise as possible, which is already a pretty hard feat for me. Beverly's hair is described at one point as a cloud, which gave me the idea that it was very soft and messy, but of course in a beautiful way. My boy Steven cannot for the life of him skip an opportunity to mention her beauty. I quite like how she ended up looking. Originally, I gave her a skirt, but then I got to a part in the book where she says she's actually wearing slacks, so oh well. Before I began to read It, I was a little worried because it's such a huge book, and I feared the amount of time it would take me to read it. I'm a very fickle reader, so there's always the possibility that I will lose focus of a book and then I won't go back into it in a year or more. Despite that I found it a little tedious at the beginning because of the sheer amount of description this book has, I fortunately took to it after a little while and flew through the pages. It is a grand experience to be consumed by a book, and that's how I felt while reading It. At times, I would not stand up from the couch for hours. What I enjoyed the most were the characters. If there's something I can say about Stephen King, it's his wonderful character delivery. They are all beautifully unique and quite distinguishable from one another. You can really feel how each of the losers are individuals with their own way of thinking about things and expressing their thoughts. It's wonderful. But there's this other wonderful thing that King does in this book, and it is seamlessly transitioning from one POV to the next. It is a masterful thing. I think that also helps with the thing about keeping you hooked, because a lot of the POVs and small inner chapters feel connected. If you haven't read the book, here's an example of how that looks. There is this part in chapter 19, in The Watchers of the Night. Just as part 2 of the chapter is ending and part 3 is beginning, we go from a scene with Beverly in her childhood as she's being chased to another with Mike in his adulthood as he is in the library. Beverly did not hear them precisely. That was not what made her turn her head as Henry Bowers closed the distance. Bent-kneed, shuffling, a frozen grin on his face. Henry was as silent as an Indian. No, it was simply a feeling, too clear and too direct and too powerful to be denied of being watched. Mike Hanlon laid his pen aside and looked across the shadowy inverted bowl of the library's main room. He saw islands of light thrown by the hanging globes. He saw books fading in the dimness. He saw the iron staircases making their graceful trails at spirals up to the slacks. He saw nothing out of place. All the same, he did not believe he was alone in here. Not anymore. My other favorite thing about this story, which is pretty connected to my first point, is the character relationships. I eat those up. There's something really sweet and real about how the losers interact with each other. These are real kids I'm reading about on the page. Irreverent, funny, careless, rude and very mean at times. Children being like this is something so very real, and I think people don't tend to portray them enough like that. At least not anymore, because political correctness is a very real thing. I knew kids like this when I was 12 or 14. They were little shits, and I think that would have been even more real for the 50s. Cons. I don't really have a lot of those. I'm a very sweet-natured reader, I think. You won't find me complaining about much. But, Stevie, my boy, you don't have to bring up the boobies of everyone at every chance you get. It's fine to leave something to the imagination. There was one thing I didn't like though, and that was Bill cheating on his wife. For my own sake, I'm going to be very, very generous and assume that Bill and Vev slept together because the strings of a grander play were being pulled by a cosmic entity. Because otherwise, there was really no good reason to cheat on Audra, but I digress. For the second character, I decided to do Mike Hanlon. I love him so much, and I kept hoping he would join the losers sooner. Just like with Beverly, when I read he wears glasses, I was outraged. How dare they deprive my bookish little fellow the privilege of some nerdy glasses. Unlike with Beverly though, I don't have a big rant about glasses. I can only say, guys, how hard was it to give him a pair of glasses, really? When I was coming up with ideas for how to draw Mike, I kept thinking, okay, what would it be like to grow up as the only black kid in a white town? Does that affect how you style your hair or what you wear? Especially because Mike works in such a public space as the library and he'd be under constant scrutiny. I think I was onto something with the hair thing, but unfortunately, I'm not knowledgeable enough to have an accurate opinion on that. I'm not super happy with the design I came up with, but hey, you win some, you lose some. Now, let's talk about some of my favorite things. Mike is not my favorite character. He's a very, very close second, but he's not my favorite character. My favorite character is actually Bill. Bill, lovely Bill. He's so precious to me. But I think more than how much I like him as a character, which I do very much, I love more how everyone loves him and how magnetic he is and how much the losers look up to him. I love how protective he is of them because he understands the responsibility he has as their leader. There's this part almost at the end of the book where because Eddie has a broken arm, he's being very protective of him, and just after a moment of a lot of distress, he gives him like a very, I don't know, relieved hug. I just find it super lovely. My favorite side character has definitely got to be Audra, or that random barkeeper at the beginning of the book who didn't know who he was running a gay bar until like years later. I raised my glass to that dude. My favorite scene is probably the one where all the losers tell Beverly one by one that they love her. It's after she gets angry with them because they don't want her to go into the smoke hole because she's a girl and she shouldn't be doing that, those kinds of things. I found it super touching and a very endearing form of genuine love. And I don't even think it was romantic love, at least not for most of them, but that of very deep friendships. I especially liked when Mike said, "I don't know you enough to love you, but I do love you anyway." I just found it super lovely. Wait. I changed my mind. Mike is just so precious. My lad, please take your rightful place as my most favorite character beside Bill. They can share the spot. There's enough room. Mike and Bill. Again, about these deep platonic relationships. I loved at the end of the book how freely these connections were being shown. Right now I'm thinking almost at the very end of the book, when Mike is at the hospital and Bill is saying goodbye to him and he gives him a kiss on the cheek, and it's just very lovely. I love it. What can I say? Now, fear inside the book It, the scary factor. I have to say I was never really afraid while I was reading it, and I am a very scaredy cat kind of person. That said, it may have to do with the fact that I mostly read this book by day and under nice sunlight. But there is one thing that did make me quite scared, and that is Patrick Hoxter's death. I'm not sure how to put it into words, but it was very unsettling and it made my skin crawl. It was a really horrible way to go. And on that note, that's one very interesting and unsettling character. I can kind of half remember him from the 2017 movie, but I think I like it more how quietly menacing he was in the book. Some thoughts on the end. That part at the last confrontation with it, when they are grown-ups, where Bill and Richie's minds are being flung into infinity, I felt like I was watching the movie Interstellar. Not an unpleasant image, I might add. It was just very bonkers. I loved it. Again, the love the losers hold for one another kills me and touches me so deeply. I was brought to tears at the very last pages of the book, when they began forgetting each other, and it hadn't even been a week since they had defeated Eat. That messed me up, but it was so beautifully delivered. And I was also so scared for Audra at the end. I can't believe Mr. King let her leave and gave her back her sanity. That felt like a flipping Christmas miracle. It made me so happy. Concluding thoughts. Well, I really enjoyed this story. That feeling persisted for about 98% of the book. It was a wonderful experience and I'm so glad I decided to get into it. I give this book a 4.8 stars, but an absolute 5 out of 5 stars in Goodreads. In my opinion, it deserves all the hype that it gets. So far, Stephen King has not disappointed me with any of the books that I've read of his. I'm quite eager to get into more of his work. Also, I'm very excited to do my little It marathon. I'm going to watch the movies and the miniseries very soon. I think that's all about it. What book should I do next? This is my pile of unread books, some of them anyway. Say hello to them. These are mostly from my last purchase, but one of them could be the next book I do a video on. Who knows? I was getting back into Dune right before it grabbed me by the but now it's too cold in my city to get back into a desert story, so I'm not reading that one. Just a quick look at how they ended up looking. There we go. This was probably my favorite from when I was designing the characters. And this is my favorite, Mike. This looked like a teen, I think. She looked so cute here. I really liked how she looked here. She looks so cute. She looks a little bit angry here, which, you know, it's reasonable for her current situation. My ultimate conclusion about all of this is that having concrete ideas is hard. Articulating them is even harder. I possess neither the ability to be concrete or articulate, but I do try my best. Thank you for watching.